All right, folks, I'm finally ready to give you my full review of the Z series ThinkPads from Lenovo. Now, the one on top has a vegan leather finish. This is the Z13. You can get it without this leather finish if you want, and I would recommend that you go for the all aluminum finish. This big silver one, this is the Z16. This is the one I prefer between the two. I think I've just gotten to a point where 13-inch laptops are just too small for me. Even switching from my 14-inch MacBook Pro to the Z16 for the purpose of this review has been kind of nice, something a little bit larger. Now, one of the big benefits of a 13-inch device is that you normally get better battery life because they're running on less powerful CPUs, and then you also get the portability benefit. But, you know, really the 13 is not that much smaller or lighter than the 16. The 16 comes in at, I think, 4.2 pounds, and the Z13 is 2.5 pounds. And relatively, that may sound like a big difference, but when you actually pick them up and use them or you throw them in a backpack, they're not that much different. In fact, there are some key benefits to having a larger laptop when it comes to portability. Okay, so we've established that a big laptop like the 16 is larger dimensionally and heavier than a 13-inch, but it also requires a bigger backpack. If you get a bigger backpack for your bigger laptop, then you can put more stuff in there, like an Xbox controller, and you can also throw in a Steam Deck. You could throw in an iPad Pro, right? That type of stuff, or a Galaxy tablet into that bigger box or bigger bag. So anyhow, all of that aside, let's focus now on these two devices. Now, they both run on AMD 6000 series Ryzen processors. You can get them with Ryzen 5 up to Ryzen 9. The Z13 only goes up to a Ryzen 7, and it runs on a U series Ryzen, so lower wattage, should get better battery life. However, I've actually found that the battery life on the 16-inch with the Ryzen Pro 6000H series is really, really good. Okay, so from a design perspective, these two different options, they come in aluminum or this vegan leather finish. Now, my problem with the leather finish, I like it, I just don't love it. The problem is that when debris gets on this, and it does attract debris, that debris can actually move as you try to wipe it off. It just goes from one crevice on the leather to another piece of leather, another crevice on the leather. There we go. So it's not ideal in that sense, but it's pretty good at rejecting fingerprints, which is cool, and it gives it a nice, beautiful look, very formal, classy look, without having to, manually skin it, right? It's there. I just don't know how this will hold up over time. I imagine it'll hold up quite well, but I don't know for sure. Now, they both have the new microphone and camera arrays that Lenovo has implemented on pretty much all of their 2022 laptops, Intel-based or AMD, ThinkPad or Yoga, they're all there. From I/O, big differences between these two. On the left-hand side, here we go. The Z16 has quite a lot more I/O. 2 USB 4 ports and an SD card reader, whereas the 13 has just the USB-C port. And then on the other side, both have a headphone jack, but only the 16 has a Kensington lock, and then they both have another USB on the side and the power buttons. The design's really nice. There's this beautiful, like rectangular, but rounded design to it. And the way they've used the antennas, I think the whole thing just looks really classy. Very beautiful in my opinion. Both have the ThinkPad logos on the bottom right and the Lenovo badges on the top left. So you get consistency there. This 13-inch does come in a bronze color palette, but also comes in silver. Okay, the keyboards are similar but different, but the big thing to call out with these keyboards is just how much different they are from a typical ThinkPad or even just a typical Windows machine. So the lettering is bolder and bigger on the 13-inch, but the keyboards are the same size. There's really no difference between the two. They're both backlit and they look good. White is your only backlighting option. There are 3 different stages and it gets plenty bright in the dark. The trackpads, though, are the real game changer and much different from anything you'll see from other Windows-based machines, unless you look at the new Dell XPS 13 Plus, which I haven't personally gotten my hands on. But now there's a haptic motor underneath the trackpad, so you can forcibly click anywhere, but instead of actually depressing the trackpad, there's just a little vibrator to let you know. I just said vibrator on one of my videos. There's a little kickback that lets you know that you've pressed the key. So you can actuate the keys anywhere that you want on the trackpad, and you can adjust the sensitivity on this to make it like weak or strong, right? Requires a lot of force or provides a lot of feedback. Either direction you can go. Now you'll notice on the top here, there are these dotted lines like this braille right here. So on a typical ThinkPad trackpad, this exists. And then above this, right here between the space bar and those lines would be the physical buttons for mouse 1, 2, and 3, or 1, 2, and 3 being in the middle. Instead, what we have here is a software simulation. So you would press here to simulate actually pressing mouse 2 without the physical key being present. So it's a different design from the ThinkPads, and that might throw some traditional ThinkPad users off. On the left side, control and function on both the 13 and the 16 are in traditional Windows laptop keyboard position versus ThinkPad position where function would be on the left and control will be next to it. Now, for a long time now, a couple of years at least, in the Lenovo ThinkPad Vantage software, you'd be able to go and then change the functionality of these, but now at the hardware level, it's already set that way. So if you prefer having a traditional keyboard layout, then this will excite you as a ThinkPad fan or ThinkPad user. You may be a user and not a fan. Okay, back to the 16-inch. So I like to think of the 16-inch as a Dell XPS 15 that, I don't know, is a little bit more premium. Now, I'm not a huge fan of Dell laptops. I don't really have a good reason for that. I've purchased a few and returned them because of quality issues, but that doesn't mean they're bad, right? So by no means am I telling you buy this instead of the Dell XPS 15 if you seem to have you found a better price on the Dell XPS or you just love the Dell XPS. But the thing about this, I mean, it looks like an XPS 15, the way the speakers are positioned, somewhat to a degree the materials, there are a lot of similarities. But this brings the ThinkPad functionality to the table and more I/O than the Dell XPS 15. But the pricing is where there's going to be a pretty big difference. Now, MSRP on the 16-inch is somewhere around $2,400, $2,500, and that just climbs from there. However, this is Lenovo, and so discounts are aplenty. Even right now, in the middle of September, no practical reason for it, it's not a major US holiday or anything. The price here in the States is already just below $2,000 to get in the door with the ThinkPad Z16. The Dell XPS 15 still, you can buy them on it. You can buy them pretty well spec'd with Intel CPUs at Best Buy for like $2,000 or $1,900, maybe even a little bit less if you get open boxed. But I still prefer this despite it costing a little bit more. And I wouldn't be surprised if the next major holiday, the price comes down even further and becomes competitive with the Dell XPS 15. Now the Z13 has a price closer to $1,600, $1,700 MSRP, but again, Lenovo sales, it's right down to $1,350 here in the States. But that is a U processor versus the H processor in here. So you get more wattage, the CPU here is more powerful, and you'll overall get better performance. But you've got to think about who this is for. Lenovo have made this a modernized ThinkPad, but it's not necessarily for everybody, right? I guess every laptop is that way, right? They're built for certain markets. And I think the market segment within the business world that this Z series is aimed at, the 13 as well, is at the director level, the manager level, the people who report on KPIs, but they don't necessarily pull levers and twist dials, right? So they don't need a lot of power. They're not going to open up a bunch of VPNs and stuff like that, or whatever really smart computer scientists do. But they won't be crunching a lot of numbers, but they'll need Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Word. They'll need multiple browser tabs and to give presentations. In which case, the one thing I think is missing here, as far as performance goes, this is well equipped off battery or on battery to tackle all those applications simultaneously without a hitch. I had really good performance, been using this for a month for work, so it's Teams, Outlook, Word, etc. But I wish this had native HDMI. That would have made a big difference for me. I like that. I'm a big fan of just being able to plug in that HDMI and going, instead of needing something like this dongle, which, I mean, fine, you put it in your bag and off you go. But if I'm gonna buy a 13-inch machine, cool, dongle me all day, right? I expect it. But when I'm buying a 16-inch machine, I'd like to have more I/O. So, and I know that dimensionally, Lenovo could have shoved it in there, but underneath the hood, I don't know what's going on. I'm not an engineer, so who knows? Maybe they knew what was going on and they knew they couldn't fit the HDMI. I don't know. So let me summarize this for you now. The display, I should mention, is 1920 by 1200. It's IPS. It looks really good. It's a sharp display. There's Windows Hello to get you logged in as well. I'm a big fan of what Lenovo did here with this machine. Inside of Windows, it all works really good with the display, the way it's calibrated, all that fun stuff. The speakers are good too. Everything sounds fine. But again, not MacBook level. I shouldn't say again, because I just say it every time I do a video, I guess. It's like the MacBook is the gold standard for audio. Okay, here's the summary. Both really good devices. Really cool new touchpads or trackpads. The cameras are 1080p and they look really good, so perfect for all of your video conferences. Enough power to get you through. You can get through a workday, no problem. 10 to 12 hours on the big one in my experience. The little one also about 9, 10, 11 hours. It sort of depends, but I didn't do a formal battery drain test. I just did a practical test, and I was getting through work days without a hitch on these machines, like totally fine. Now with the big one though, the battery life, it's good, but I felt like when I was exporting through HDMI on battery to a projector, I felt like the battery really drained quickly, but that's so subjective, it's hard to know for sure. So if you're really looking for this to do a lot of presentations and you have to do an HDMI out, or I shouldn't say HDMI out, I mean, it was HDMI through the USB, but if you're gonna do a lot of presentations, you may wanna disable the primary display and then just output strictly instead of running both the projector or the TV and this display. So just to save on battery life. I think the design is beautiful, really liked what they've done, and again, targeted at people who are at the management level plus. And so I think if you walk into a meeting with something like this, it's gonna look really cool versus that traditional ThinkPad, which attracts a lot of fingerprints, massive bezels. If you don't need the military specifications that ThinkPads traditionally carry, then I think you're totally fine to look at something like this. And yeah, that's it. That's it overall. Didn't get too hot, didn't get too loud. I mean, the fans do kick on for both these machines, but I don't feel like it's distracting. And I could definitely see myself running with the 16-inch over my 14-inch MacBook Pro, but the 13-inch just a little bit too small for me. So big thanks to Lenovo for sending these over. Huge fan of these devices, definitely recommend them. And I'm really excited to see what Lenovo does in the future with these. So hope you found this helpful. If you have questions, let me know. Cheers.